Jon Vest is the Extension Agent for Floyd County with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. His expertise helps novice and experienced farmers produce quality livestock and crops throughout our region. Jon has offered to share his experiences with our audience and provide them with the knowledge to keep agriculture strong. This is the Ag Show with Jon Vest.
Welcome, friends and neighbors, to this session of the Ag Show. Brought to you today, we're actually standing here at G.J. Ingram's and Sons. Many of us are using fertilizer in two different directions right now. Many on the garden itself and our vegetable plantings, and others are starting to look at that green grass and really wanting things to really be prepped and ready to push that turf through the summer. So we thought it'd be a good time to explain fertilizer, what it means with some of the numbers that you see on the bags, and help just provide a little better understanding of how much to use or what it takes to figure out. I'm standing here in front of a couple different fertilizers or fertilizer options that we may choose to use. It's not uncommon to see the 10-10-10 and the 5-10-10, our garden fertilizers. They're very popular at whatever store you choose to shop at. I know from Harmon's to Ingram's to Wills Ridge, even Slaughter's, they've got plenty of selection. I would encourage our viewers to get out and have a conversation with these folks if you're looking for product for this season. We've already mentioned the soil testing and some of that soil preparation. 10-10-10 and 5-10-10 are two excellent forms of garden fertilizer. The 10-10-10 and even the 10-20-20 over there would make excellent choices when it comes to fertilizer for the home garden. We also have some products like we see to the left of the camera here, the right left of the screen. This is a turf fertilizer, and this particular fertilizer has some some different numbers attached to it. And like I said, we're going to explain those numbers and try to make it just as practical and understanding as we can so that you can enjoy putting down the correct amount this year. Starting off, once again, every number on a bag of fertilizer, or those three main numbers, stand for your three macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. The first number is nitrogen. That's our first nutrient, our first macronutrient that's so important for green leafy growth when it comes to either the garden or grass in general. The second number is phosphorus, and phosphorus is what usually will provide lots of excellent root growth, root development down below, also aids in flower production and fruit production. And lastly, the final number is potassium. And potassium is that element that I like to call the antifreeze in the plant. It truly is an element that helps provide the vigor of the plant. It enables that plant to be somewhat more drought tolerant, more tolerant of swings back and forth with regards to dry and wet periods throughout the season. It really does think of it in terms of the overall vigor and health can really be established by maintaining your potash or your potassium in the plant. Now, when it comes to each one of these numbers, they are indicative, or they actually represent the percentage of each one of these nutrients in this bag of fertilizer. For instance, in the 10-10-10, we have 10% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 10% potash. That remains the other 70% in the bag, or makes up by weight, is the material that either helps slow in its release or improves its ability to be spread. It can be other elements and materials, micronutrients as well. When it comes to figuring out the quantity to use, we need to be conscious of what the crop we're growing requires. Any of your Solanaceae plant family, your tomatoes, your potatoes, your peppers, even eggplant. In most cases, we want to somewhat minimize the overall amount of nitrogen so that those plants that flower and fruit have an opportunity to do just that. If we were to get excessively high with our first number or with our nitrogen, we might actually find that we have reduced fruit development. While the bags of various fertilizers have different numbers, like I said, that first number is nitrogen. That's what we're going to concentrate on right at this moment. Nitrogen can come in different forms. It can actually be processed and coated so as to provide a longer lasting form that's not as readily available to the plant initially upon application, but that will allow for a single application to last throughout the season. So when you're choosing your fertilizer, we still have to choose the variety or the type of fertilizer wisely. This particular fertilizer right here is listed as a lawn and garden fertilizer. And for the most part, the reason we're still considering a garden fertilizer is we really don't have a nitrogen higher than about a 20% nitrogen. And this would enable us to use this either for lawn and or garden, production. The nice thing about this particular fertilizer is it is a sulfur-coated nitrogen that allows, or a sulfur-coated urea, it allows its nitrogen to be gradually used over a much longer period of time. So in the case of using it as a lawn fertilizer, where I may only want to fertilize that lawn one time, this fertilizer here will enable me to get out here in the spring of the year, make that application prior to June, and at that point, I'm set well on into fall with this ability to feed that turf throughout the season. Whenever we're working with fertilizers and we want to determine the actual amount to use, there's where soil testing certainly provides us a good idea of how much of each of these nutrients we may need. For instance, if I want to use a 10-10-10 fertilizer, and I know that I want to put 100 pounds of nitrogen down to the acre, for instance, or if we were spreading by actual volume or treating it as a bulk application of 10-10-10, we would actually look at how much of the element we want. And in the case of saying 100 pounds to the acre, we would take that 100, we would divide it by the 10%, so 100 divided by 0.10, and that would result in us understanding that if we wanted to apply 100 pounds to the acre of nitrogen, we'd have to apply 1,000 pounds of 10-10-10. Fortunately, we don't usually apply that much nitrogen at any given time. In fact, most of us, for a single lawn application, to be safe and hopefully not burn the lawn or create a situation where it's too much salt going down at one time, we would probably look at 40 pounds of nitrogen being applied in a lawn situation. If that was the case, whether it be lawn or field, and I wanted to put down 40 pounds of nitrogen, once again, 40 divided by 0.10, we would find that we need 400 pounds of a 10-10-10 in order to supply that amount of that nutrient. The same principle holds true for however whatever numbers we're using. If we step over to the 19-19 fertilizer, or basically the equivalent of a 20-20-20 fertilizer here on the end, and wanted to apply that same 40 units, 40 divided by either the 0.19 or divided by the 0.20 would result in needing 200 pounds of fertilizer to go down to supply 40 units of nitrogen on that lawn or field situation. Now that we've kind of established how to determine the amount of fertilizer to choose or select based on that number, now we can look at the remaining two nutrients, because like I said before, we can have green leafy growth We can have nice tuber or root growth below the soil line. And we always want to have an adequate amount of potash or potassium for our overall plant vigor. So let's take it, for example, in a garden situation. If I'm growing potatoes or one of those crops that would really benefit from having a phosphorus, additional amount of phosphorus, I'm going to want to choose a fertilizer such as the 10-20-20 to the right. That 10-20-20 will not have so much nitrogen that it maintains a vigorous leafy growth or leafy top, but in turn will provide the phosphorus and the potassium necessary to really develop a nice potato crop just below ground. In terms of our flowering and fruiting plants, the tomatoes and the peppers, a 15-15-15 or a 20-20-20, and those balanced fertilizers really do work well to provide an initial plant development and provide that given size and flush growth necessary for our garden varieties, and then still allows for the phosphorus and the potash in that case to really push the bloom and the fruit development later on. So neighbors, if we had to decide on the fertilizers behind us here, you've watched me mention this as a lawn fertilizer multiple times, but the fact of the matter is it's phosphorus content and even its potash to some degree in the form of a slow release. It would provide a relatively long application of feeding in a garden situation. I would consider a fertilizer with a reduced nitrogen and a higher second and third number to be excellent choices in a regular garden situation to carry those crops like your potatoes, your sweet potatoes, your carrots, onions, things of that nature. In the interest of being a complete feed, we would suggest moving over, and if we need to boost things initially with an even numbered fertilizer like 10-10-10 or 20-20-20, and say 4 to 5, maybe 6 weeks in, we start recognizing that we need to reduce the nitrogen a little and bump up some phosphorus or potash in an additional feed, or even use a liquid fertilizer that is high in phosphorus and potash but reduces the nitrogen. We'll get that flowering to start to take off in the garden that's going to give rise to our fruit. If we really want to push a potato crop in a garden situation, we would be looking at a fertilizer with an adequate amount of nitrogen, but really does have a suitable kick when it comes to the phosphorus and potash there at the end. As our viewers can see, we've stepped inside to the indoor storage area so I can show or speak briefly about our bulk fertilizer options. Certainly fertilizers, depending on how they're delivered, are coming pre-mixed to some degree and or are established in their macronutrient feeds. That being said, what I have behind me is actually a 5-12-36. So a 5% nitrogen, 12% phosphorus, 36% potash. And I just wanted to remind folks, particularly in a field situation where a soil sample has been done and conducted through either the Cooperative Extension Office or your favorite soil sampling company, but that information has come back specifying that you need considerably more potash than the other elements. I can substitute in some instances an additional amount of potash in place of some nitrogen. So if you ever have a concern or a question about the proper fertilizer mix or how to achieve a desired level of application, contact the Cooperative Extension Office or your extension agent and have a conversation with them, or we'll take it to the university in the soils lab and have that conversation through the folks that are providing us the recommendations based on the soil test report. One way or another, we'll be able to make sure that you're getting the correct application for your given situation. We're working with basically a salt product that has either through synthetic process and or organic development and stuff created a situation where we have a pelletized form that may or may not be specifically wrapped and coated to provide some external or long-term application. It may be relatively quick in its application. Regardless, there are those different forms of application that we could talk about or discuss, such as regular drop application in a drop spreader, or the whirlybird spreader, or what we call the broadcast spreader that distributes it out in about a 10-foot, in an irregular lawn situation, about a 10-foot, maybe 12-foot pattern as you're walking across the lawn. And finally, in a bulk or a conventional field application, we'd be talking about the truck next door to us here. So either truck or buggy next door to us here. So when it comes to fertilizer applications, we may think of where we're located. I talked to and mentioned the high phosphorus and potash. Those are nutrients we don't like to see get washed away. So particularly for those of us that have sidewalks and driveways, we don't want to be broadcasting fertilizer up on those surfaces where they can be washed down into the stream or into the flower beds and create an excess of those nutrients to deal with. So in many cases, a drop spreader for most home use is a suitable application for applying fertilizer. In the event that you want to handle a larger area, most of us will move from a drop spreader that drops the fertilizer straight down to a, once again, whirlybird or broadcast spreader that relies on a spinning plate to broadcast that material 10 and or 15 feet, in distance or width. The best way to apply, given those types of spreaders, is usually to apply your fertilizer at a half a rate, going left to right, and then come back and apply the second half of your application in a perpendicular fashion. By applying your fertilizer in a perpendicular fashion at a half rate at one point and then coming back and applying the other half, you ensure yourself of reduced skips and or misses in the application if you're using one of those rotary type spreaders. I wanted to talk a little bit about the differences in grass seed and the availability of seed when you go out and you're looking down and up and down the aisles for that particular product of choice. And I wanted to mention to most homeowners, in the case of most homeowners, the hardest wear, longest wear, and in many cases most tolerant seed that I can suggest when it comes to either foot traffic, animal traffic, or the like, is going to be a fescue, a tall fescue grass seed. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't get those fescues that provide a little more of an athletic appearance. That's certainly possible. But most of us have grown up or at least familiar with K31, the product, the standard tall fescue material that many contractors and home builders have used for years. It's a wider blade. It's probably the most resistant, even when it comes to just the general tolerance of wear and even drought in some instances. It's a very strong grass seed to consider. Now, that being said, for many of us that would like a more athletic look to the lawn, that's usually achieved by blending or using some of our new turf type tall fescues and or blending a perennial ryegrass into our mix. The fact of the matter is, if we're ever working on slopes or areas that we're looking for quick germination to occur on, it's hard to beat ryegrass. Annual rye will actually emerge, or annual and perennial rye usually will germinate in 6 to 10 days and at least start to hold an area that has potential for wash or on a severe slope, prevent it from washing as quickly as any other grass seed I can suggest. Now, that being said, the perennial rye is going to offer you the continued growth year round, year in and year out, but perennial rye packs its own concerns when it comes to disease and additional management. It grows very nice. It's very thick. It's what we mix and use in our athletic mixes at the high school and baseball fields. So it does work to match and form a nice sod very quickly. And in the event something gets torn up, it tends to grow back in very quickly. That being said, we'll oftentimes mix that particular perennial ryegrass with a tall fescue or a turf type tall fescue. There's lots and lots of different varieties out there. Contact the extension office or your ag agent. We'll be happy to send you the most recent. Every year we provide all the updated seed varieties, the best of the best, so you're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges when it comes to grass seed. So we can absolutely suggest you those named varieties. But here I just wanted to mention, here's a tall fescue grass mixture here in front of me. On every bag of grass seed, you will find sewn into the top opening area an actual paper tag, and that will have the varieties of seed and their content percentage-wise located inside. So in this particular fescue bag or turf-type fescue bag, it's listing Falcon 4, Renegade, and Tribute 2. All of those are excellent, truly beautiful, athletic-looking forms of fescue, not nearly as wide as the K31. So if you're looking to overseed or start to establish a lawn and develop or improve its color over time and its overall width of its blade and things, that type of blended tall fescue or turf type tall fescue blends certainly will help you achieve just that. So to conclude, when it comes to your grass varieties or the availability out there, when you're out shopping, and once again, support your local retailers. I know I certainly do, and I appreciate having one on each side of my county and one in between as we're heading out, and even slaughters down at the garden center. But when you're out there choosing these products, if there's ever a question or you have a concern, contact your extension agent first or contact the extension office. We'll help you get you on the right track. And I'm sure that you'll have a retailer near you that will be more than happy as a neighbor and a friend, making sure that you're growing the best that you can grow in Floyd County. Want to remind viewers with one last point of order. We've mentioned the fertilizer, we've mentioned grass seed and some of those concerns to best get you off in the right direction. The last thing I failed to mention was the use of lime and the availability of lime to help elevate your soil pH. In many cases, if we're looking at a renovation situation in the home landscape, or even if we're looking at elevating our pH in the garden, lime certainly plays an important role in making that or assisting that pH to be moved upward on the pH scale. In the case of growing good grass is fairly easy. We want to kind of have a window of opportunity or window of pH from a 5.8 up to about a 7, anywhere within there. And our grass, for the most part, grows very easily. So if your soil test came back low, either a pelletized or a pulverized lime would certainly work to adjust your pH up. And the same thing for the garden. In the event that you came back with a significantly low pH, say in the lower 5s, our window of opportunity, or that would best serve a majority of garden variety plants, is to have a pH in the lower 6s. It may drop as low as 5.8, but in the case of your legumes, your peas, your beans, all of our half runners, and things of that nature that are in the legume family, I have to manage them at a slightly higher pH even than that of my tomatoes and peppers and potatoes. So having a nice garden pH that ranges anywhere from say a 6, an even 6, up to a 6.6 or 6.8 would be an ideal window to shoot for in the event of trying to grow those favorite garden varieties. Hello neighbors and friends. Wanted to revisit just for a moment while we had the opportunity. We've got many questions about how best to keep a nice thick lawn, a turf that's desirable both from the road and the windshields of passers driving by, as well as just for your personal enjoyment there at the house. And one such example of what I consider a nice lawn is right out here in front of the business offices of Citizens Telephone. Ideally, a nice 4-inch level is where we would like to cut our grass or keep our turf maintained, particularly if it's a cool season tall fescue or turf type tall fescue grass, like what we spoke about in the seeding segment. I actually have a couple examples here in my hand of the difference between the tall fescue that I mentioned being a much more coarse or wider blade grass versus that of a ryegrass. The ryegrass, for lack of a better explanation, is a thin grass. It provides that athletic appearance, much like you would experience on the baseball field or the football field at the high school. And we mix that ryegrass in with the fescues. Once again, I'd mentioned the K31 as being a regular contractor level grass, but we also have those other varieties, or particular those mixed bags that have turf type varieties, such as your Falcons and your Renegades and your many other varieties that are available that Extension will be happy to supply you with some of those names for. It's important for all of us viewers and neighbors to realize that lawns are kept up and managed and maintained at various levels. And even the level that we certainly have here is one that we can be proud of. And in my opinion, that's accomplished with that added height, maintaining that height of the mower itself. It allows for a deeper, thicker root system to progress on the plant. It allows for the top of our grass, the turf layer that we enjoy laying in and playing in and running barefoot through. It allows that grass to regrow at a much faster rate than cutting low and into the main canopy or the main crown of the grass itself. So once again, just wanted to give the viewership a couple tips. Keep your blades sharp, allow your grass to grow a little taller than what your lawnmower is going to typically be set at. Even push mowers and riding lawn mowers today are designed to cut grass, particularly fescue turf, much lower than it would like to be cut and maintained. So in the interest of having a healthy lawn and a nice thick turf that's as green as anyone else's, raise that mower deck and keep the blade sharp.